If you feel like you can't fight for what you really want, your dreams, what you really want for your future, that has to change, because the only person that is ever going to prioritise what you want for your future is you. I just don't want people living a life where they feel like they don't have options to make something happen.
Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Samantha Hearn. Hi, Sam.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited for where this conversation might take us.
Yeah, me too. I'm intrigued.
So we start with a ritual, which is for you to describe to our audience and tell them who Sam is.
Okay. Who am I, or my journey of how I've got here?
No,
who I am.
Who's Sam?
I am a Gemini. I'm very, very ambitious. I would say I'm quite funny. I am obsessed with binge watching TV, reality TV shows, but I also love a crime thriller, very eclectic with my taste. I love doing things all or nothing. So I've signed up for the London Marathon.
Yay!
Yeah, I know, wild. I like doing things to the nth degree. So some would say I'm maybe quite an extremist. I like to challenge myself. I like to do different things. I just like to have fun with good people. I would say I'm very, very genuine. I have quite strong values and I wear my heart on my sleeve. So you would always be able to tell how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. So yeah, as an individual, I'd say I'm fun, genuine, quite passionate, very determined. And I just like good people.
Amazing. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up and what was life like as a child?
I grew up in a place called Feltham, which is near Hounslow in Middlesex. It's not the nicest of places. Obviously, I loved it as a kid, but coming out of that, all of my friends and school I went to, everybody was working class. There was quite a lot of crime, quite a lot of drugs, a lot of teens out late, lots of house parties, drinking, doing things that you probably shouldn't have been doing. And I had quite a few, even kids in my class at school. One of them threatened our form tutor with a knife. So yeah, it was pretty rough and ready where I grew up, but I had such great friends. I lived on a dead end road. All of my neighbours had kids my age or within 1 or 2 years. We'd all just play outside, play football. It was so what you wanted from a childhood. We were always outdoors. We were always playing. There was always people. All of my friends lived a walking distance. I could walk to school, never had to get a bus anywhere. So although we didn't have stuff and our upbringing was, for everybody, when I say I mean all of the people I was surrounded by, was very similar. We had so much fun as a group. It wasn't really about what you had. And back then there wasn't social media, so we had none of those worries. PlayStations weren't all the thing. People weren't queuing outside Apple for the latest device.
No, you were just outdoors having fun.
100%.
What was home life like?
Home life was different. When I was younger, so I've got a twin brother. So if I say we, obviously I've only ever known life with him. So yeah, I've never been on my own. So we've got a mum and a dad, and there was a 19-year age gap between my mum and dad. So as a child, we didn't think that was unusual, but the older we got, the more it was a bit different to some of our friends. So who
was older?
My dad. Okay. So my dad was older. And he was 42 when we were born. So he hadn't had children up until us, and then got one of each in one go, like amazing. My mum was 28 when we were born. So as young children, that was probably the only big difference, but it was a difference. Then we're twins. Everyone used to comment on the fact that we're twins. And then when we were about 7, my mum had an affair and left the family home, and we lived with our dad. So that was another difference. Everyone would say, why don't you live with your mum? That's so unusual that you live with your dad. Why didn't she stay? Because of course, when I say back then, it's not that long ago, but it was long enough ago that the stereotypical scenario was, if your parents weren't together, of course the mum would stay at home.
Yeah.
My mum and dad were both really hardworking, really ambitious. My mum was really successful in customs. My dad had his own security business. So I came from a really working class but ambitious family. My parents both worked hard, and my mum worked shifts. So that was one of the reasons that she moved out, because my dad did 9 to 5 and had his own company. There was a bit more security.
Let's just go back a few steps,
Yeah.
which is you were a twin, or
Yeah.
you are a twin, not
Yeah.
were, you are a twin.
Yeah.
Does that mean everything growing up was about the two of you, or were
Always.
you able to have a bit of your own identity?
So our mum and dad we were never allowed in the same class. So
Okay.
when we went to school, we went to schools that had, our primary school was 3 form entry and secondary was 8 form. So it was stipulated we weren't allowed to be in the same class with each other. They wanted us to have our own friends. We definitely had our own friendships. But once we got to, 14, 15, of course, friendships merged. We have similar interests. We picked a couple of the same GCSEs. But it affected us in things like school trips.
Yeah.
If we couldn't both go, neither of us went. It was always, but it had to be fair. So yes, we had our own identities, and we are very different, very chalk and cheese. So we definitely had our own identities. But when it came to parenting, it had to be fair. If one had it, the other one had to have it.
Right.
So there were times we missed out. We couldn't go on the school ski trips, because they were too expensive. And that is a lot. And I do get that. And we got that at the time. We never really were that bothered by it, because of course we had no other choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were always the twin. I think it was harder for my brother than it was for me.
Why?
My brother's got severe dyslexia, and he was naughty. He would say that he didn't really like school, didn't like conforming. Whereas I'm a typical abide by the rules. I was a very, very good girl. He was always compared to me at school. Parents' evenings, why aren't you more like your sister? Why aren't you more like your sister? He used to
Yeah.
get that all the time. You're so different to your sister. So I think it was harder for Sean than it was for me. And I completely understand that. Because he was I was the benchmark, I guess. And he was constantly being compared to that. And he's so successful, but just in different ways. And also from a learning perspective, and
learns
I became
differently.
a teacher, people, and even now, home educating is such a big thing now, and special educational needs, and understanding that people learn differently. When we went to school, that wasn't the case.
Yep.
You conformed and you did what you had to do. You were put in sets and you did higher or foundation GCSEs, and that was it. So he was marginalised, I think, quite a lot, because he did learn differently, but he was so clever and he's so successful and he's got such a great job and life. But back then, when you're 12, 13, 14, and you're constantly being told, why aren't you like your sister? Purely because you learn differently, which now we know, but at the time, that made him quite angry.
Yeah.
So our relationship wasn't great for a few years. And obviously puberty, I mean, hello, I liked all his friends, he liked all mine, cringy. So yeah, it was tenuous at times.
Did you have any rules around that, of going, you're not allowed to date any of my friends because they're my friends and I want them to remain, and vice versa?
We did, but I broke those rules. So that was when I broke the rules. My first boyfriend was one of his, in fact, my first 2 boyfriends, my first love was one of his friends. I used to play rugby together. We used to do everything together. But yeah, Sean has never broken that rule with me. He's never dated one of my friends.
He's a good boy. And so you talk about your mum
Yeah.
leaving home when you were age 7. How did that feel for you?
It was really weird, because even now when I look back, I've always been old for my age, and I've always been told that. I've always been told I'm really mature. I've always been told I've got a good head on my shoulders. So I've always been quite together. So I mean, when I look at the situation now, it is crazy, some of the things we experienced. But at the time, I was very much, this is life, So I didn't have the same reactions, I think, as potentially when I look at me now. I'm more shocked now than I was when I was 7, really. But yeah, when we were 7, she came back from a trip. She used to have to travel away. And she sat me and my brother down and told us that she'd slept with someone else. And obviously we're 7.
You?
Yeah, she told us, yeah.
Okay, so she was honest.
Yeah, she was honest. And obviously when I look at that now, I think that's mental. What are we doing here? But, and I just said, are you having a baby? She said no. And I said, what's the problem then? Obviously I'm 7.
Yeah.
And my dad's heartbroken. He was obsessed with my mum, absolutely obsessed. Loved her so much, and loved her so much more for giving us him us. So I think he really struggled, because he always wanted to be a dad, and then he got both in one go. Like, he was just so besotted with her. He got everything he ever wanted, and he got the family, and And essentially she ruined that for him. So I know that that was really hard for him. So I think I found it harder for him. Even now when I talk about it, it's been such a long time. That's what gets me, how much I know he was heartbroken. We were fine. You know, we stayed with our dad. We stayed in our family home. We had each other. It was him. That's where we saw the difference. So she moved out. We stayed with our dad and it just affected him. You could see it affected him. He was just not the same. And he was really angry, really bitter, and then just really sad. So I think I wasn't so sad about the fact that my mum and dad were not together or my mum left. I was more sad about how it impacted my dad.
How sad your dad was as a result of it.
And I think my brother felt that as well. We were just because he was the most loving man. He had the best heart, from Yorkshire. Like, northern people are the best people. They're so warm, so friendly. They're just amazing. My mum's northern as well. She's from Lancashire. But, you know, like the Yorkshireman, like, he was a classic morals, good-hearted man. So I think it was just hard for us to see that. And it did, to us, it came out of nowhere. She'd come home and that was it. And then, you know, she stayed in the family home for a year. That was really difficult. And then she moved out. And then, it was me, my brother and my dad until a bit later. And then she moved back in when we were 14.
What happened, or what was it like living at home with just the three of you and you being the only female, but also knowing that your dad was sad? Were you still in contact with your mum? What was that dynamic like growing up until you were, I think you said 14?
Yeah. I mean,
so 7 years.
Yeah, this is where I definitely feel like I'm old before my time, because when I almost see it as two different people now. When I look back at who I was then, I don't know how I did all of those things. I'm just this little girl. And when I think about it now as the adult, I think fair play. Like, you know, this is wild how I just functioned. But I took on the mum role, really. I did all of the washing. I'd make sure Sean his school packed lunches. I'd make sure we were ready for school. I'd make sure my dad was ready for work. I did the ironing. I sort of just looked after us, really.
At the age of 7?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or from the age of 7 onwards?
8-ish. Just made sure we were ready for life, really. Go to school. Yeah. When I say life, I mean like our everyday existence at that point. Yeah. Make sure we're ready for school. I would make sure my dad was okay. Sometimes we did have an au pair. So we always had an au pair from little to maybe like 10. We'd have an au pair every year. So we did have someone that lived with us as well and helped. But I definitely stepped up and like did more. And me and Sean would always, in the evenings, we'd watch TV with dad and like massage his legs and like look after him. It was like a little ritual. So it was different. The dynamic was different, but it never felt boy heavy, because again, my dad was so loving. He was so open, so emotional, so warm. It was never really, he was more maternal really than my mum. So I never really felt like I was in the house of boys. And we just had our own thing going on, really. It just, to me, it felt normal. It didn't really feel like a different dynamic or, you know, like it was unusual. To us, that was just how it was.
And so when you talk about differences right at the beginning of we were different, you just never necessarily knew them, but it gave you some differences.
Yeah.
What was that about? Where did that come from? Where did you know that you were different?
I think just with all of my friends, you know, and if I think about my closest friends who I'm still friends with now, their parents are still together, very similar ages. It was just slightly different. So if I don't think about what I know now and I think about what I knew then, it was more the fact of, they were very similar in age. It was just, their house was just slightly different to mine. The mum was obviously there. They were together. Yeah. They didn't work. Some of my friends, their mums didn't work and the dads worked, or they worked part-time. Whereas I had 2 full-time working parents, which for so many is the norm, and it was. Yeah. But in my sort of like circle of friends, there was one that worked less, or if they worked shifts, the one was more present. Whereas it was always a bit more of a juggle. My dad would always be at everything and like make the effort to be there, but it was always a juggle. Yeah. But it was more that, really, I think. And the twin thing, that was a big, unusual. People ask me now, you know, oh my gosh, what's it like to be a twin? Do you have like, you know, twin vibes? And I just think it's just how my life is. But that's a natural differentiator, you know? So even when you introduce yourself to people, I would always say, you know, I've got a twin, because it is different. So I think it's just those slight nuances rather than big things. It wasn't there was one standout thing that made me think I was different.
Okay.
Just these small intricacies of my everyday socialising I would pick up on was slightly different to mine.
And so what happened when you were 14, 15, when your mum came back? How and what happened there?
Yeah, so we still saw our mum from like 7 to 14. We still saw her. We would go to her flat. She would come to us. Like we'd visit. Like we'd still see her. She'd come to things, pick us up from school. She was still involved in our life in that 7 to 14 period. But we lived with Dad, and he was our primary caregiver. And then he had to go into hospital because he had gallstones. And he had to have keyhole surgery. So it was our summer holidays. So obviously neither of us could drive because we're not old enough. So Mum at that time did come and like ferry us around and come to the hospital every day, visit Dad. You know, she was definitely involved in all of that and orchestrating us being able to be there. He went in for keyhole surgery and had loads of gallstones, more than they expected. It was like a big, like it was full, like like a little wee sample tin. It's full. And they said, we've got all the gallstones, but once we then saw him, I realised something wasn't right because his belly was massive, which obviously they blow you up and do all of those things, but it hadn't gone down, and his back was completely purple, like just completely bruised. And I remember thinking, well, that's not normal. That is definitely not normal. And he just didn't seem right. So he spent 3 weeks in hospital, and it wasn't right, and it wasn't improving. The bruising was just insane. And of course, at that time, they weren't necessarily having the conversations with Sean and I. They would still speak to my mum. Although I was my dad's next of kin, I'm under 16. So of course, they're not going to come to me and tell me all these things. So they were still kind of going through her. But it definitely wasn't right. Anyway, that carried on. And then they said, eventually, and I don't know when this happened, but they said that there was a problem with the operation.
Right.
And there was an incident and they cut his liver. And he couldn't recover. His liver was not recovering. Then he got sepsis. Then he got pneumonia. And then he died. So, yeah, he spent 3 weeks in hospital. And then they called us. So the day before he died, he was doing really well. And obviously you have that fake, which again, I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But the day before, apparently, before someone passes, they're like back to themselves.
Yeah.
So we were like, this is amazing and it's great and like all of these things. And then they called us the next day and said, you need to come in.
So you lost him within 3 weeks? Wow. That must have been tough.
Yeah, horrific. I don't think I will ever experience anything like that. I think it was harder because we knew it was coming. So when they called and said, you need to come, I called my best friend. And I remember I was on my driveway and I called my best friend and I said, he's going to die. And she said, it will be fine. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. So for me, it was more the fact I knew it was coming. And I just went into complete panic. And I said to her on the phone, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't live without him. I can't live without him. Like he's everything to me. I love him so much.
Yeah.
And obviously then my brother, like my poor brother, was just absolutely beside himself. So we knew it was coming, but yeah, it was horrendous. So we drove to the hospital. And by that point, he was in a really bad way. He couldn't talk. He was in so much pain and he's sucking on the little ice lolly things. And me, my brother, my mum were there. And I held his hand and I said to him, it's okay, just close your eyes and go to sleep. It'll be fine. And then he took his last breath. And that was it. So we said, but then what was hard, so then my brother said, oh, he's gone. And I said, no, he can't be gone. Because obviously they look the same.
Yeah.
I left the room and I just broke down in the foyer. I just was on the floor and a nurse had to come and get me. And I said, I can't live without him. I can't live without him. And I was distraught. And and then they said, do you want to say goodbye? Do you want to, kiss him goodbye? And my brother went in to give him a kiss and he like breathed out. And we just both, oh my gosh, like we were just absolutely beside ourselves. We were like, he's awake, like go and get someone. And then they said, oh, look, we're really sorry, but this is normal. Like it's his body exhaling air. So that was horrendous. And then they took us into a room and offered us teas and coffees. And I said to the woman, and even then I said, what am I going to do with a tea? And I felt bad for her because, of course, that's their job. And I looked at my mum and I said, as if this is how I was still like I am now. I looked and I said, as if she's asking me if I want tea. Like I was so bemused by the whole thing. I was like, this is crazy. Anyway, and then and it was late. It was in the evening, and then we had to go home. And on the way home, it was, what are we going to have for dinner? We got a Chinese takeaway, and then the talk started, about the funeral, and what we were going to do. And it was 2 days before me and Sean started year 10. So we were just about to start our GCSEs. Sorry, he died on the 23rd of August and his funeral was 2 days before we went back to school. But yeah, nothing will ever be as bad as that, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that changed the trajectory of everything for me, I think. And then my mum had to move home. And that was really difficult because, of course, the dynamic was very different then. And I think one thing I will give my mum credit for is I can only imagine how hard that is. You've got two kids that were so deeply in love with their dad. You've come home and all they want is him.
Yeah.
So that's a huge rejection for her. And I can definitely empathise with that because she can't fix it. And
there's
being a
nothing
mum
she
now,
can do.
there's nothing she can do. And being a mum now, I think there was two things. One, I would hate for my daughter to be in pain and not be able to fix it, of course. But then you've got the fact that all they want is the parent that you're not. So I can appreciate from her perspective why that would be so hard for her, because you've got two kids that, and again, it wasn't about this, but she would have taken that as a personal rejection. You want your dad, you don't want me, you love him more. And she would say things like that in her own anger. You love your dad more than you love me. You probably wish it was me, not him. In her own, and over that, those first 2 years were really tough on all of us and really hard for my brother. He took it really hard. I went back to school, worked really hard, got my GCSEs. He had a really tough time and, didn't do as well. And then the next saga began. So yeah, that was that stage.
The Instagram life, what you see, what you hear, it's just unexpected.
Yeah, so unexpected. And I'm quite open with this story. And my community and my audience know this story, but it's very different to having this conversation uninterrupted and having the space held. Whereas normally I'm telling it myself, so I can kind of orchestrate where it goes and plan how much I'll share. But my audience know the story and I'm very, very open with it because, and I'm asked this all the time, do you wish it didn't happen? And do you wish he was still here and things like that? And I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't be me and I wouldn't have my life. And he was everything I needed him to be. So I wouldn't, and I don't in any way wish I had a different dad that was still here. I don't wish he was younger. I don't wish any of those things because he was mine. So yeah, it was hard and it is hard. And when I share it with people and I share my story, I'm really proud it's my story. And I tell people that I would never change it. I wouldn't change the fact I don't speak to my mum. I wouldn't change the fact that she left. I wouldn't change the fact that my dad died and I was there. I wouldn't change any of it because it's made me who I am and they're mine. And ultimately, I wouldn't be me if I didn't have them.
Yeah.
So as hard as it is, and I would say this to anyone, it's so hard. And grief of any proportion is horrific, but it is made me who I am. And I'm so deeply proud that he was my dad. And I'm so grateful that my mum, as hard as her decisions have been, that she's made them because it's given me the life I've got and the tenacity that I've got and the choices I've made. So although my initial up to 21, so much of my trauma was almost imposed upon me through choice or not through choice, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change the life I've been given.
And what happened with your mum? What happened through the years?
Yeah,
what's your relationship
we
like
always
now?
had quite a difficult relationship, I think. And when I look back now, it's because I'm very much my dad's daughter. I'm very, very morally forthright. I'm very much a know-it-all. I'm that kind of kid. I was always that kind of kid. And my niece is exactly the same as me now. I was always that, but you said this. I was always like that. And I was very but that's wrong. And I would say to her, you can't do that. So I definitely know that I was triggering for her because, of course, and I can see that now again as a parent, how your child will have traits of the other parent. But if you're not together, that's very difficult because you're not with someone that you don't like. You love your child, but they have these traits. So I know that would have been hard for her. So we always had a bit of a strained relationship from that perspective. Don't get me wrong, my mum, I have such great memories with my mum, and she did so many amazing things with us, and we had holidays, and she did everything that she could with what she had. But in my later years, maybe when I was about 18, 19, she met someone, he moved in, they got married, and she sold our family home and moved to Jamaica with him. So my brother moved to Scotland to be with his now wife, and I moved in with a friend. And then for those 2 years, I was still at uni. So for those next 2 years, I moved 5 times. And she's been in Jamaica ever since. So the earlier years in my life wasn't really the issue, really. I would say before my dad died, she did everything. You know, we still saw her. They were co-parenting. But I would say from maybe 15, 16 is when things started to be different.
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk. Links are in the show notes below. What was your relationship like through your adult and teen years, or teen and adult years, with your mum and beyond?
Yeah, difficult. The thing is, I would say I have quite strong, it's hard to explain. I have quite strong opinions, but I'm also very non-judgmental. I don't care what anyone else does. And I'm so supportive and open to however people want to live. But I also do have quite strong opinions when it comes to like my family and if I know things are wrong. So my mum would do quite a lot of things that I just didn't agree with. So we clashed quite a lot. And I didn't agree with quite a lot of her choices. So I would say my late teens, early 20s were difficult, and they were quite strained. We didn't speak, I would say, from maybe around 20. I was about 20 and we didn't speak again until probably I was around 24 and I was going to get married. And I said, you know, I invited her to the wedding, the ceremony, but not to the evening. So we sort of spoke and she came to that. And then my brother got married 2 years later, saw her at that. But yeah, it's been quite strained. We don't really communicate that often.
And she's still alive?
Yeah. She lives in Jamaica still. She's still there.
How does your journey take you from that point to where you are now?
So I'm asked this question a lot because, of course, my story does seem there's quite a lot of consistency. There's quite a lot of dominoes in the trauma cycle. Yeah. It's not like there's one event. There's sort of like a ricochet. So this comes up quite a lot. And I would say what I probably learned was, well, when my dad died, I realised how easy everything can change. I realised just how horrific life it really is, you know. And as a kid, of course, you always have this like weird fantasy idealistic view. Mate, that did not exist.
That was ripped apart. Yeah.
So there was definitely an element of me that became a bit colder, you know, when people would moan about things and I'm like, are you all right? Are you sure? You know, like, I don't think what you're moaning about is actually necessary. In my mind, because I was only a teenager, so I did have a little bit of like, oh my God, nothing can compare to that. So there were a few years where that level of intense grief was my benchmark. And of course, in normal life, nothing is ever going to be that intense. So I think it's changed my life because I realised quite early on that when I was a child, so much of my life was decided outside of my choice, outside of my control. I had no control over so many of these things.
Yeah.
So when I was old enough to have control, whether it was doing my GCSEs, doing my A-levels, doing my degree, getting my job, anything I could control, I would excel at. So I became very good at succeeding.
Right.
And that became the norm for me, success, doing well, achieving. So I kind of used the fact that now I had complete autonomy over my life. Well, I'm going to make it the best I possibly can. And I'm going to make the best choices. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do all of this. So I think it culminated in my work ethic hugely. And the fact that I wanted to create a different future. And I also knew very early on that I wanted to be different. So, I had conversation with my mum when we kind of had this like reconciliation before my wedding. And I said, look, ultimately we can move forward and we'll be civil and we can move on. We'll leave this to bed. However, I do need you to know that when I have a child, I won't raise them and be the mum that you were to me. I fundamentally disagree with quite a lot of your choices. That we've done that now and that's the situation. But so I knew very early on that I wanted a distinction between who I was and who I wanted to become, and my upbringing and my experiences versus my future, and the fact that I knew I could control it. So I did very much go into a different version of myself. What can I do to make this the best it could be? Now I can control it. That definitely is the biggest impact it's had on the trajectory of my life, for sure.
And you got married?
Got married, yeah.
And what was that like? And I don't mean the wedding, etc., but making a choice to get married, the relationship that you'd seen with your mum and dad.
Yeah, for sure.
How did that all impact everything that you then thought a marriage was or having a child was, etc.?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. I definitely got I'm so loving. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm so loyal. I'm fiercely protective of the people that I love. So I've always had that in my nature, outside of the fact that I had, parents that weren't together and infidelity and all of those things. So me as a person, that's just in my nature. Like I want to look after people and I want to make sure people are okay. I met Luke when I was 20 and he was everything that I shouldn't have been with. He was just the worst choice. He was 25. There's 5 years between us. He was just the epitome of what I shouldn't have been with. And all of my friends are like, I can't believe it. Like he's such a player. He's this is not going to work. Don't go what are you doing? Yeah. Because I was such a good girl. So yeah, he was the absolute opposite of what I should have been with. But there was just something there. So I don't know, there was just something there. He wasn't my usual type. He had a girlfriend at the time. I had a boyfriend at the time. Like we weren't like single. We didn't like act on it. There was just something there. So yeah, I met when I was 20. And then by that point, my anxiety was quite bad. I had quite bad anxiety probably from about 16 when it came to relationships. People ask me this as well. I do not have any insecurity or anxiety around me succeeding. None. My like self-belief and ability to achieve is like watertight. That there is absolutely no doubt in my mind ever. My anxiety is around people being loved, being accepted, being abandoned, people leaving me.
Yeah.
It was so prevalent. And it's different now. I've worked on it a lot, but it's still not great sometimes. I can still have flare-ups if I'm tired or if I feel like emotionally vulnerable. But on the whole, I'm so much more solid in myself. But between maybe 16 to 25, it was really bad, really bad. I would have a list of all my friends on my phone, on a piece of paper, and the last time I spoke to them. And if I hadn't spoken to them in 2 or more days, I'd reach out. And I was just so obsessed with making sure no one would forget me. When WhatsApp brought out the blue tick, I mean, that ruined my life for a long time because I was like, someone's read it, they've not replied, what have I done? I'd make up reasons to message people again so they'd have to reply. So my anxiety was not great. And then when I met Luke, who I now loved, it was horrendous. I didn't want him to leave. What if he cheated on me? Because I knew he had this background. So I would need like a week's notice for him to go to the pub. It was so bad. Like it was cripplingly bad. I just could not control myself. So our relationship probably from when I was around 21, 22 to 24, those 2 years, because we bought a house after 8 months, which is when I look back now, but we bought a house after 8 months. So we lived together. So it was very intense, but that was really tough, because he was still 27, I was 23. He's still going out. I'm obviously going out. I've just got, I've started teaching. I've graduated. We still had our freedom, but I was just so worried he'd leave. So I went back to counselling and we worked through it. And he would always say to me, it's so weird, Sam, because I would never tolerate this from anyone else. I've never had a girlfriend that I would let behave like this or treat me like this or be this out of control.
Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like it. But all I want to do is look after you. And he would always say to me, I've never, ever thought about leaving. Even now, I just think, oh, he's such a good egg. But at the time, it was uncontrolled, like to the point, there were points I would be holding on to him, like screaming in his face, like, oh, don't. It was out of control. went back to counselling, worked on myself with him. I went on my own, but I'd come home and I'd have like homeworks to do, and like we'd have to do things as a couple, and he did it all. And I remember thinking at the time, mate, you are not old enough to be dealing with this baggage. Like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
But he stuck around, and he always said to me, he'll say it even now, he's like, I just never, you know, having a child was a huge upheaval. And even then he said, as hard as things are, I would never leave. I've never thought about leaving you. So the first years of our relationship, although they were great, and also as well, this isn't hidden. Everyone knows this. That's the other thing about me. I am absolutely not a highlight person. I'll share all the stories. And if I was with my friends and we'd had an argument, I would share that. I'm not like, oh, we've got this pristine. I'm not like that. Of course, in my photographs that I share online, I share the best bits because I want those memories.
Yeah.
So I'll share them. But if you speak to me or I share on my stories or I have friends in my actual life, I don't put those pictures on because they're the things I discuss with people. So that's really important to me. I don't have this kind of like one-sided view of my relationship at all. But once we got engaged, I settled down a bit. I did sort of, I started to feel much more secure. And we had a 13-month engagement. So we got engaged on Christmas Day on 2013 and we got married March 2015. So it's our 10-year anniversary in a few months, which is crazy. And so that settled down for me and I started to feel a bit more, you know, like this is my person and I'm his person. So, you know, we've got this. And his upbringing was very different to mine. He's a complete, so he literally was like, your life is like EastEnders. I've never met anyone like it. This is crazy. But of course, and his life was just so like 2.4 normal, you know. So that was, I think, hard for him as well, because of course then I didn't have a dad. Our mums and dads have the same names. So our parents have the same names. So that was always a weird thing, Dee and Terry. So our parents have the same names, and his dad, he lived with his dad, where his mum and dad separated when he was like 25. His dad lives around the corner from us. He's got a really good relationship with both his parents. So he found that really hard when I obviously didn't have my dad and my mum didn't live here. He's like, this is so unusual for me. So of course he found that quite a lot of pressure being my constant.
Yeah.
Because he, you know, he's like, this is a lot. But yeah, it worked out. And after we got married, things did settle down. Well, that's a whole nother thing. We couldn't get pregnant. But pre that, our life then settled down and my anxiety was much better. I'd worked a lot on that. We'd still have tiny little flare-ups, but it was nowhere like it was at the start. And things were just different. So yeah, we got married. I was 25, he was 30. And then things just seemed to be more how I wanted my life to be. You know, like I had a job, I had a house, I had a husband. And it wasn't about ticking things off for society. It was more about me. I wanted to create this puzzle of completion. I wanted to feel like I had a life that was not around all of the upheaval and trauma that I'd had. I wanted just a piece of time where everything was just as it should be for me. So then I did feel much, much happier.
Calmer.
Yeah, much calmer.
More settled.
Yeah, and I felt really happy with my choices. So yeah, that's our beginnings of our marriage.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah, wild.
What happens next?
And then we try and get pregnant.
Okay.
So 25, get married, and then I was a teacher at the time, and obviously and I had a really good job, obviously, as we've discussed, my like need to be successful.
Yeah,
I had a really good job, was doing really well. So probably when I was about 26, we were in Mexico on a holiday, and we said, oh, you know, let's start trying to get pregnant. Of course, we thought in Mexico we'd have sex and get pregnant naturally, as everybody does.
Yeah.
Because when you're at school, you're told if you have sex unprotected, you can get pregnant.
So it's just going to happen.
It was just going to happen. We're going to have sex this one time in Mexico. Oh my gosh, we're going to conceive. We're going to have this holiday baby. And we're going to call them Havana. So we were like, this is going to be great. Anyway, had sex. Oh my gosh. And we went out that night. Remember, had sex and we went out and we're like, oh my God, we could be pregnant. When I look back now, oh, the naivety. Anyway, didn't get pregnant. And that carried on for about a year. And it started to get progressively worse for me, like mentally, because of course, as we now have established from this conversation, I like to succeed.
Yeah.
Now, of course, having sex is not difficult in terms of like, I'm not trying to even be crude, but as people having sex, that's not a difficult thing to do. So of course, if at the end of that, you should be pregnant, it's kind of like, well, it should just be 1 + 1 is 2.
Yep.
That's it. There's only really one way this goes. And it wasn't happening. And I was like, I don't know what is going wrong. I felt like a failure. I felt like, what is wrong with me? Then all of those feelings came back up again. Not being enough, being rejected, abandonment. So I was like, I just can't live like this. I sat on the sofa with Luke and I was so unhappy every time I got my period. And also remember now I'm at the age where everyone's getting pregnant. And of course, Luke's friendship group, I'm friends with the women. So not only am I, say, 27, he's what, 32, 33. So I've got a lot of people getting pregnant, my age and his. So it's sort of like this culmination
just
of babies.
Everybody around you is just pregnant.
But it was. It was. And it got to the point where I said to Luke, I don't want to go in case they tell me they're pregnant. It was a lot. And anyone that's ever been through this journey, it's all consuming and it's constant heartache. And there's nothing you can do because you can't do anything but have sex. So it's not like, oh, we're having sex on the wrong day, so we need to only do it on Tuesdays, and that's the solution. There's no other solution apart from, well, you just have to keep doing the thing that now you don't want to do, because the more you're doing it, the more neither of you are enjoying yourself. You're not doing it because you want to. You're doing it because you want to try and get pregnant, and you know you're not going to get pregnant. So it's like this never-ending cycle, right?
Yeah.
And obviously Luke's like, this isn't fun for anyone. It's not. Anyway, so we sat down on the sofa and I was upset and I said, I can't live like this. I can't do my job. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. I was head of year 12, I think. No, I was ahead of year at the time. And I taught 2 subjects to A-level. He obviously had a good job. And I said, I need to do something else. I need to put my energy into something else. And I've always been a solution-based person. I'm not really one to like sit in the problem. So I started my first business. So in 2016, I started my first business, which is in anxiety and mental health. I wrote a book about anxiety. It became a bestseller. I started doing talks. I spoke all over the UK, did some talks in America, went really well, like booming. And I was able to leave teaching because of that business. So I left teaching in 2018 and then I transitioned into business mentoring and coaching, which is what I do now, because people started to ask me, how have you done that? How have you built a business and had a full-time job and left the full-time job? So I transitioned really in 2018. So it was called A Happy Mind. I transitioned in 2018 to Samantha Hearn, and then I did business mentoring and coaching, and I still wasn't pregnant, FYI. So we're in 2018. I'm now doing the business mentoring. It's going really well. I'm on the radio. I'm on Talk Europe. Like, we're traveling the world. I'm doing all these amazing things. I'm speaking with Paul McKenna. It's going so well. I'm going to LA on business retreats. I'm speaking on Good Morning LA. My business is booming. I'm on front pages of magazines. I'm contributing to global websites. I'm being interviewed, anyway. So it's all going great. And now I do business. So I'm not doing the anxiety, I'm doing business. 2019, it's all still going really well. I've got all the money, all the sales, clients, I'm running events. And we're still not pregnant, obviously. And then so then it just carries on. And then we have COVID. So you obviously, we were then going through IVF, it got to the point where they can't find anything wrong. And 1 in 4 couples have unexplained infertility, basically, which just means you can get pregnant, but you're not.
Yeah.
So the professionals were like, if you keep having sex, eventually you will get pregnant. We don't know why, really. There's nothing medically. We had all the tests. We paid to go to St. Paul's and have second opinions. They couldn't find anything. We were above average. I was 4 times above average. Luke was 8 times above average. So we were like, WTF? What's going on?
Yeah.
So anyway, then we start going down the IVF route, and then it's COVID. Then they lose our paperwork. Then we have to start the whole thing again. We have to move doctors, etc., etc. Fast forward, all in the meantime, the business is going really well. And my business doesn't know about this. My community don't know about my struggles, because the other thing I'm a really firm believer on is when you have a space on social media, for me, I do take that really seriously, and my responsibility that people are listening to what I'm saying. And what I never want to do is create a problem that I can't also bring a solution to the table.
Right.
And that matters to me, because I feel like then I'm just opening up wounds for other people that I also can't help heal in any way. So the last thing I wanted to do, for me personally, and everyone's different, but my business wasn't around children or hormones or trying to conceive. My business was around business. I didn't want to open up and say, we're struggling to get pregnant, and then everyone tell me, because I knew it would be common, the same, and I can't do anything to bring a solution.
You can't give them any advice.
Yeah, and I was like, that's
help
unsafe. I think that's unsafe for me to do online, because then all I'm doing is opening up the wound or the trigger and leaving them, because I can't help.
Yeah.
So my online community didn't know anything about this. And then in 2022, we get accepted for IVF. They call us in January. We're in America. We travel a lot. They call us in January. We're in Washington. And they say, you've been approved and you only have 3 months to use your IVF funding. We got funding. Now, not everyone in the UK does. We're super lucky that in our county, in Surrey, we get funding. But you only have 3 months to use it. And of course, it's done on your period. So when they call me in January, I'm on my period. So that's 1 month down. February, we're going skiing. That's another month down. So then we had to go in March. That was it then, really. And we were like, okay, cool. Well, that's what we're doing. So we started IVF. I went to hypnotherapy. I was doing meditations. I was really working on my mindset, my energy, all of those things, keeping my body good, exercising, looking after myself, went for IVF, and it worked first time. So, which I'm so grateful for, because I know that journey's a lot. And I've got friends who will probably listen to this. And they've had really, really hard experiences. So to the people I know, I love you. And to the people that are experiencing this, I know it's a tough journey. But we did IVF and we got 4 embryos, blastocysts. So essentially, not to just to give people a bit of context, they take all your eggs. Yeah. And then for us, we did IVF where they just put the sperm together and then see if they fertilize. And then, they got 10 eggs, and this is only if people are listening and they're wondering. So they got 10 eggs from me, 8 of them fertilized, 6 got to day 3 and 4 got to day 5, which is the best. So then 3 get frozen and the best one gets put inside the host, because they have to be a certain quality to freeze because they're frozen at -100. Yeah. So when they thaw, they have to be able to survive. So we got 3 frozen, they put the best one in me, and that's my daughter. So so we had it was obvious, it was meant to be, because we had our transfer. So that's when they put the fertilized embryo into the host. Yeah. We had the transfer on the day before our wedding anniversary. I was going
to say your wedding anniversary, wasn't it?
The day before our wedding anniversary. And our pregnancy test was on Easter Monday, which was at that time the 18th of April, and Luke's birthday's the 19th. So there were so many little synchronicities. Then we did the test on the 18th and it was positive. And now she's nearly 2.
Wow.
Yeah, she's 2 at the end of December.
And she's absolutely adored and loved.
Oh, I'm so obsessed with her. It's a joke. She's the best thing in the whole world. I love her so much. And I would also say this to anyone, I would wait another 6 years if I could have had her. The wait doesn't matter now. And people used to say that to me. When you've got a child, this won't hurt so much. And I know that when you're in it, you don't believe that, but it's so true, because now I've got her, I would do that all again. I would sit and cry on the toilet for my period. I would sit and cry to Luke when someone told me they were I would do that all again for her, because she's exactly what we were meant to have. So, yeah.
And exactly the right time.
Exactly the right time. She was meant to be our little girl. So, and it was all meant to be, because I didn't like Christmas, of course, once my dad died and the situation with my mum. And Luke proposed to me on Christmas Day with a letter to my dad on my Christmas tree. And then she was born just after Christmas. So I love Christmas now. My Christmas tree's already up, and we are filming this in November, just for everyone listening to this. My tree's already up. She's already wearing Christmas pajamas every night to bed. And I'm obsessed. We're watching Christmas films. So I love that's another full 360. Yeah. Luke did that for me and wrote a letter to my dad. And since then, 2013, the magic has been restored.
You're not supposed to make me cry.
I'm sorry, yeah. And now the magic has been restored. Yeah, I love it. And I love that. I just think as well, life is meant to be lived. And I've definitely lived life. But I'm grateful for it all. I really am. Even when I wasn't getting pregnant, I started a business. I created something good. And I just think sometimes we forget that bad things don't have to be the end. That's not the full stop.
The difficulties can
they can
enlighten something else and create something new.
And it's also part of our story, even me and Luke, when we first got together, my anxiety was so bad and our relationship was so intense. Then we got married and it was amazing. Then we wanted to get pregnant and we couldn't, and that was really hard. And now we've got a cherub. So it's kind of, it's just the way our journey was always meant to be. It's hard before it's easy.
Yeah.
So now completely different in 2024 to where I started.
And so what comes next? What is there left for Sam to do?
I can't ever sit still in myself. I love doing, I have to be out all the time. I think for me, 2025 is already wild. I've got speaking gigs already planned for the start and the end of the year. I've got my own events. I've got a clothing line that I've launched. I've got candles and journals that I've launched. I've got front cover magazines that I'm doing. We've already got all our holidays booked. So
you're a planner.
I love planning, yeah. And we've already got all our holidays booked. So life next year is going to be more of the same but better. That's my new phrase. I want everything the same but better. I love my life. I love the people in it. I love how it's all turned out, and my brother is happy. He's got 5 kids. I love
5 children.
Yeah, he had his first when we were 22, and she's the spit of me. So he calls me a lot for her. She's me, in every way. She's headstrong. She's stubborn. She looks like me. She's my child, basically. And also my daughter looks like his kids, because obviously our genes are quite strong. Yeah. So, it makes sense. But yeah, I think I just want my life to be more of the same but better. I'm so happy now. I'm so happy with the people in my life. I'm so grateful for the journey. I'm grateful for the people I spend time with. And, it's different now. Life is different now. There's not so much turbulence. There's not so much trauma. I feel like I've lived enough for all of it for the rest of my time. So I would like things to just be settled now.
Calm down a little.
I would like that, yeah.
What's the one question I should have asked you that I haven't?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. The one thing I always say, or I try to get across when I do interviews, is the only reason I am where I am is because I always advocated for my dreams. And I actually think that so many people don't do that. That's probably the thing that makes me saddest now, or that I'm most passionate about. Like, even in the depths of my hard times, I have always fought for what I wanted in my life. I've always fought for my seat at the table. I've always made sure that I prioritized my dreams. And I remember even when I met Luke when I was 20, I said, I'm going to be rich and famous, but not like David Beckham. I was like, people know who I am. Like, I want that. I have something to say. And I know, and it's not from an ego. It's not recognition because I was abandoned. It's not that. It's more like I know that I have something to share with the world. So, and he was like, yeah, fair play. So when I started my business, I was like, I'm going to do this. He's like, I know you will. Even like today, coming here, I've had to sort out childcare, and he's like, yeah, cool, we'll do whatever you need to do. So I have someone that would always fight my corner, and he was so good. When I said I wanted to start a business and leave teaching, everyone thought that was nuts, because I get such good holidays, such good benefits, all of the things I could have wanted. And I was like, no, see ya, I'm going to just go and sit on the internet. Obviously, of course, that was unusual. And then when I said I wanted to write a book, when are you going to write a book? Even now, you're going to run the marathon. How are you doing that? You've got 2 businesses, a baby. What are you doing? I'm doing it. I'm always fighting against the narrative of, but how will you be able to do that? I just don't believe that should be a thing. And so the one thing I would always say to anyone is, if you feel like you can't fight for what you really want, your dreams, what you really want for your future, that has to change, because the only person that is ever going to prioritize what you want for your future is you. And if it's the kids, your health, your hormones, your partner, your dog, your parents, your job, I just don't want people living a life where they feel like they don't have options to make something happen. And if it is wild and you don't think people will understand and they're going to call you crazy, you have to keep going until they ask you how you've done it. That's what I did. People are constantly, not so much now because they're used to the fact that I have this tenacity and this, I have an unwavering belief in what I want to achieve. But at the beginning, people would always say, you want to write a book? Like, you're going to be on the radio. You're going to do what? Like, just chill out. No, I'm going to do these things. So it will get to the point where people say, how have you done that? Rather than why. You have to do that. That's my biggest passion and driver is please advocate for yourself and for your future. You are meant to be doing the things that you want. And it shouldn't be a conversation of, oh yeah, no, I really wanted to do that, but then this. Oh yeah, 10 years ago, oh gosh, I wish I could have done that, but I'm too old now. Oh, I don't have the time. I don't want that to be people's narrative, Yeah. So it's not so much a question, it's more a statement. I just think everyone should be advocating for their dreams more. And this is a perfect example. Sorry, my mini TED talk. Perfect example. Even today coming to this, I shared it on my stories and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have an in-studio podcast. I'm going to be filmed. It's going to be like a TV show. And everyone was like, this is amazing. Like, this is amazing. And I'm like, but you could do that too, So I said on my stories, I was like, if you want to do that, let me know. I'll put you in touch. This is not just saved for me. I'm not the only person that can do these things. Yeah. You can do it.
Anyone can do it.
Anyone can do these things. Anybody can do this. You could start the show if you want. Be the host. Don't do that. Don't do that. But don't put barriers, And people say to me, oh, how did you write a book? And I was like, I just started typing. So whatever you want to do, if people are calling you crazy, let them do it, because it's your life. It's your life. And now I get to sit here and talk about my life, and it's mine. I own it. It's mine. I love it. And I'm so proud of that. I wouldn't want this conversation to end without me being able to say that I have fought for what I wanted my life to be like.
Yeah. And if there's anything that's true from this conversation, and looking at you now, you're not the person you are today, irrespective of the life that you've led.
100%.
It's made you, and And not only it's made you, you've created that life and pushed on to create what you want and what you need.
Yeah. And that's what I want for my daughter. And that's what I want for anyone that spends time with me, people that I love, people that watch me. I just want you to know you get to do whatever you want. And don't let life make you feel like you can't. It might take longer and you might have to have a few detours, but that's okay. You know, if you want to do something, make it happen. You will be able to make it happen. You just have to find the way to do it. And don't let anyone convince you otherwise. They're not your people. If people are trying to make you do things that mean you have to squash what is in your heart, that is not who you should be talking to. Yeah. That would be my...
Go do it.
That would be my mic drop.
And just for everybody who can't feel the energy in the room, it's infectious because I want to get up and go do all the things I want to do.
No.
I've done that, unfortunately.
Yes.
Oh,
gosh.
It was one of the worst things I've ever done, but I've done it. But it won't be for you. I just absolutely hate running now. Yeah. We started this conversation with who is Sam, and I'd like to take us right back to that.
Yeah.
Which is, would you change, add, adapt anything from what you said earlier to who is Sam?
No, I wouldn't. I'm genuine. I care about people. I'm fun. I want good things to happen. I'm hardworking. I go all in. Everything is all or nothing. I wouldn't, no. I'm so happy with who I am, but I'm also really happy with my flaws, and I don't hide that. I don't hide the fact that sometimes I have to ring my friends and say, "Are you still my friend?" Even now. I don't hide the fact that sometimes I have to say to my husband, "We need to sleep in a separate bed because I just feel so sad." And he's like, okay. I don't hide things like that. You know, like I life is meant to be lived, and that's good, bad, ugly, and all of it. So I wouldn't change what I said at the start. No.
Thank you so much for sharing more of who you are in a way that is just infectious energy. And I hope everybody has got something out of this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
If you enjoyed that conversation, please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family. Subscribe, follow and like. It really helps us continue to grow. Keep being you through connection, learning and play. You are a class of your own.